Hello. I've titled this video The Myth of Talent, not because I don't believe there's such a thing as talent, but that I think that most people's idea of what talent is incorrect, and that for the misconceptions we have around talent have a negative impact on us. My name is Mark Adam. I'm an embodiment coach, and I deeply believe we all have greater abilities than we usually give ourselves credit for. So talent is generally thought of as an innate ability. So some people have it and some people don't, that mysterious X factor. And while there's a difference in how fast people learn things, and there is a range of abilities in people, this idea of talent is generally overblown and not actually useful to us. There was an interesting psychology study by Carol Dweck when she gave a group of elementary kids a challenging test. It was doable but challenging. Half the group, she told them that they did well because they were smart, because they had an innate ability. The other half, she told them that they did well because of their effort, because they worked hard. And the interesting thing about this is the kids that were told they were smart tended to avoid challenging tasks in the future because it would make them not look smart. It would challenge this idea of their innate ability. Whereas kids who were told that their effort was what led them to success were more likely to embrace challenging tasks, and more importantly, would kind of push through when things were challenging, were difficult. So anytime we go to learn something, we're going to hit a little bit of a wall where we got to push through our inability to acquire a new ability. And kids who were told it was the effort were more likely to do that. And this is true of coaches of athletes. Coaches of athletes never say, "Oh, you did well because you're gifted." They always comment on their effort and their hard work and their commitment. And that plays a bigger part. I want to tell you about another psychology study to kind of round out this idea about some ideas around talent. And it was by Gary McPherson, who wanted to understand why a whole bunch of kids are given music lessons, why some do really well and some don't, and most are kind of average. So he did a large study of over 150 kids and followed them for a long time, for several years. And as you'd expect, there was the usual bell curve. Some were really good, some not good, and most in the middle. And he tried to analyze what made the difference. What was the factor that made some people really good? And he couldn't find it. And he didn't know what it was. And then one day he was going over his notes and he discovered a question that he'd asked the kids right when they were choosing their instrument. He asked them, "How long do you think you'll play for?" And some kids were like, "Well, I'll play, my parents will make me play for this year, or I'm going to play while I'm in school." And some were like, "Well, I'll probably play piano all my life." Or, "Yeah, I want to play guitar, it's going to be part of my life." So he grouped those kids into three groups: low commitment, medium commitment, and high commitment. And as you'd expect, the kids who were high commitment had better success. But here's the really interesting part. He also asked them how much they practiced. So some kids only practice like 20 minutes a day, some 20 minutes a week, some 45 minutes a week, some an hour and a half a week. And the interesting thing is the kids who are high committed but only practice 20 minutes a day got as good as the low commitment kids who practice an hour and a half a day. That 20 minutes of effort was the same as somebody else's hour and a half. And if those kids practiced for an hour and a half, their performance levels were generally rated to be 4 times higher than the low commitment kids. So there's a bunch of stuff we can unpack about this, about practice methods and other things. The main thing is wanting something or believing that this is who you are is more important than innate ability. And we all know sometimes when kids are good at something really quickly, they're good on the baseball field, it's not often those kids that necessarily succeed. It's the kid who wants it most, who's out there on the field every day after school. So there's a way that the idea of talent negatively impacted me. I grew up in a family that wasn't very musical. My parents didn't listen to records. We didn't have a piano in the house. We didn't sit around and sing songs. And also, my mother couldn't hold a tune and was generally considered tone deaf. And I don't know why, maybe somebody casually said one time or something, but I had the belief that I was like my mother and couldn't sing. So I didn't sing. I didn't, if people sang at school or whatever, I just mouth the words. I thought, I can't do this. And then I became a teenager and I discovered rock and roll and I was like, I like this, I'm going to play guitar. So I got a guitar and actually I had a pretty good sense of groove and rhythm right away. One of the first songs I learned was Down by the River, and I played it for a musician friend. And even though I was only 16, he considered having me in his band as a rhythm guitar player because I had that sense of rhythm. But I'd never worked with music before, and I didn't have a good ear, and I didn't really understand that. My sister would tune my guitar for me because I just thought I couldn't get how you tune a guitar. It took me a while to do that. I thought it was just some people had an ear for music and some people didn't. And I had a lot of musician friends, and they would learn music. If they wanted to learn a song, they'd listen to the record and then they'd figure it out. This is before the internet, before somebody had done it for you, or before sheet music. Well, there wasn't much sheet music. Anyways, they would, if they wanted to learn a song, they would have to listen to the record and figure it out. And I tried this, and as you can expect with my limited musical training, I couldn't do it. I tried to I knew a few chords, so I thought I could play, but I couldn't do it. And just, I mean, it was kind of a ridiculous task. I didn't even understand that my guitar might not be in tune with the record. But the thing here is, I had friends who could do it, and they seemed to do it kind of effortlessly. So I thought they just had a good ear and that I didn't. What I didn't understand is that most of my musician friends had had music lessons, or they'd grown up in a music family and been exposed and been working with music all throughout their childhood. And childhood is actually a time when we learn well. And what confuses this idea about talent is that often this learning and practice is not recognized for what it is. So a kid who really likes singing and sings along with the radio every day or sings as he walks home from school, by the time he's an adult, he's put in his 10,000 hours of singing. He's done a lot of work, and it doesn't, you might not think of that as official practice, but there's been a long time when they've actually been doing it. And the other thing that confuses this idea about talent is that once we've learned something, it kind of becomes unconscious and effortless. Think about when you learn to drive a car. When you first learn to drive a car, you're very conscious of your hands on the wheel, of your gas pedal, the brake pedal, looking out for signals, looking out for other cars. But after a while, you learn and it becomes effortless. You don't even have to think about it. You can be driving in pouring rain at high speeds, talking to a friend about work, not even thinking about driving, and you're doing it smoothly. And music is the same way. People who are good at music, who've practiced for a long time, who've taken music lessons and ingrained their understanding of scales, it's kind of becomes effortless. But the thing is, nobody, going back to my friends who could figure out how to play songs by listening to the record, nobody's born knowing what an A minor seventh chord sounds like. Nobody's born knowing the blues scale. These are things that people have learned, and then they can apply that learning to what they're doing now. And just to really hit this point home, people often think music is one place where people think about people are either talented or not. And I just want to throw out the idea to you that for me, when we call somebody talented, it's that they're skilled and they imbue their skill with their own passion and personality. So if somebody's just skilled, it's kind of flat. Somebody's just kind of rawly, emotional, and we don't and doesn't have the skill, we don't consider it talent. But if somebody's skilled, they've practiced, they know their stuff, and they're able to express themselves through that, that's when we call it talent. And with musicians, anybody who's a good musician has spent thousands of hours practicing their instrument. Angus Young from AC/DC, every day after school, learning to rock out so he could get the chicks and learn how to play the blues. They put in their time. And here's one thing you might not think about, and just to kind of elaborate on this a little bit more. Singing is one thing where people think you either can sing or you can't sing. A lot of people have that idea. But most people, everybody learned to sing growing up. Nobody's born knowing how to sing. And just to give you an idea, if I sing the first two notes of a Beatles song, Hey Jude, those two notes, I'm going from a G note to an E there. When I sing the first note, my vocal cords are vibrating at 196 times a second. When I sing the second note, my vocal cords have to expand, relax, so that the vocal cords go at 164.8 times per second. It's fine motor control to go from one note to the next note. It's much like throwing a basketball through a hoop. The muscles have to be trained. And musicians will train over and over. You think that some people can sing, but all the good singers that you know, they work at it. And to give you, just to elaborate that, one of the best violinists there ever was that people would consider talent, he's famous for this quote: "If I don't practice for a day, I notice. If I don't practice for 2 days, my critics notice. If I don't practice for 3 days, the audience notices." So what I want to just emphasize with this is that often what we think of as skill, we're overlooking the practice and the effort that went into it. And that, in truth, yes, there is a difference between people and their innate abilities, but what matters more is who really wants it, who really takes the time and effort. Because the people who become good musicians are the ones who practice every day. Jimmy Page practicing every day from the time he was 14, that's what made him a good guitar player, not because he was magically born with it. So I hope this has given you a couple things to think about. And there's more to explore on this topic. I'll talk more about skill and what makes for purposeful practice, what makes for effective practice, because there's a real difference in that as well. But I just want to leave you with the idea that, don't let this idea of talent dissuade you from trying things. If you want to learn to play piano, learn to play piano. You can learn to play piano. It might take you longer than some other people, but you can do it. If you want it, you can do it. All right.